My name is Bob Sohn. I'm the chair of the Underhill Selectboard. Today's date is the 25th of July. It is a little past 6 o'clock. It is now 6:02. We have a warned agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Patty?
Yep, I'd like to have us move the personnel policy revisions to, rather than review and consider, just use it as an opportunity to review for the two new select board members and not make a decision today, because I would like to meet with employees on Monday of next week to go over the changes, because apparently there were some concern about some of the changes. So I'd like to take an opportunity to meet with all employees on Monday. And if any other select board member would like to join me, we can have two and not have a warned meeting. But I'm planning to attend, but if anybody else would like to, Monday at 11.
So we're going to review that in open session, or you want to move that into executive session?
I think I'd like to move to executive session because some of that will go into potential employee issues.
Patty, this is Dan. I could probably join you on Monday at 11, but I probably will be 2-3 minutes late, like 11:05 maybe.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Any other adjustments to the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to the next item, which is open public comment. We have a guest here, and I don't know, looks like we have some people in the virtual environment as well. So any public comment?
May I reserve this comment for the Deane segment, or?
Nope, this is the time for you to speak now, or you can speak at the end if you wish.
David Demarest, Town Highway 26. My comment for Deane Road is two things. One, I commend every class 4 road or trail abutter the bravery of asking the town to do anything on class 4 roads and trails. And I think that the problems that Dan Steinbauer created almost single-handedly so many years ago, the new board hopefully can resolve those by either providing minimal maintenance for all class 4 roads and trails equally, or abandoning them and letting the ownership revert to abutting property owners, as was done with Town Highway 11.
Thank you, David. Any other public comment? Seeing and hearing none, the next item on the agenda is the electronic speed sign for fiscal year 25.
I included a little brief summary in the packet that explained the process. I don't know if you have any questions. Everybody had a chance to review that. I won't go over it again. But my recommendation is to purchase the two signs that were already factored into the budget, but include the traffic cloud package so we can start logging data. Just so you know, there's a 100-lot subdivision that's been approved on the Jericho side of the Underhill Jericho town line. And I think it's imperative that we gather data so we'll be more informed with what the current traffic is. So this traffic cloud allows us to generate reports. We keep track of trips per day, speed, so forth. So that's my recommendation. And then, as I said in the report, we can move the one that's currently on Park Street up to Poker Hill, which is what has been discussed in the past.
Are you looking for a motion for us to take action on purchasing the
Yes.
traffic? So I'll move that we purchase the budgeted item for the traffic control signs.
Your mic is off, Bob.
Thank you. Eventually I'll get caught up to the 21st century and learn how to do all this stuff. In the meantime, I apologize. So I'm going to move that we go ahead with the purchased or the approved item in the budget to purchase two speed control signs that would include cloud-based technology so that we can gather data as recommended from the town administrator. Is there a second?
Second that.
Seconded by Patty. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to, in the proposal for the traffic cloud package for $11,768, it also talks about if somebody tampers with it, it'll automatically take pictures. I think that's
Yeah,
fabulous.
That's just like even the old sign that we have that Dan probably noticed on his way down Range Road today. Yeah, like every time I mount the sign, I come back and there's a picture of myself like this, you know? So no, it's great.
Yeah, I think that's an important feature
Yeah.
to have in the,
Yeah.
I just want to note it for the record.
Also has the capability of taking photographs of every single car. I do not
No.
enable that feature. So
I think that's probably a good choice. I have to say that I had requested, and the Guard is very active this week, and I noticed it coming down the hill to this meeting on Range Road, and it's right there, and it's quite effective. I'm going that fast. It's very effective for that purpose. So I would support the motion wholeheartedly.
Very good. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Are you ready for the question?
Yes.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, motion carries 5-0. All right, moving right along. Thank you, Brad. Fiscal year 24 budget status report, unaudited. Jennifer.
I won't put it up because there's a lot of people on the screen. I want to keep track of
Okay.
what's going on. That's fair.
Okay. I do have a presentation, which I didn't provide in your package, and historically I haven't provided my actual presentation. I usually provide it afterwards.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We did have one public comment that I was going to read and I skipped right over it. Can we do that at the closing? Well,
Sure.
Actually, it's kind of germane to one of the agenda items.
Well, if Jennifer, you wouldn't mind if Brad
Sorry.
caught us up to speed on the public comment, and then we'll
Yeah.
move on to your report.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just not paying attention. So this is a public comment we received today. Someone dropped it at my desk, and it's germane to the Deane Road erosion. So this is from Peter and Nancy Davis, who live on 15 Walbrook Lane, and I'll just read it. It's to the Underhill Selectboard regarding Deane Road Class 4 maintenance request. To all whom it may concern, we are contiguous property owners of property that are served by Deane Road. Like most of the people in the neighborhood and the broader general public, we have used this road for walking, hiking, biking, and skiing for decades, none of which requires any road maintenance at all. The only need for maintenance is to provide for ever-increasing vehicle traffic, principally for seasonal rental events at Squaw Betty and for a single year-round resident, Pete Saja. The unique topography of Deane Road, gently sloping directly off the western face of Thunder Basin of Mount Mansfield with steep vertical slope banks, places at a very high risk category for washouts. The questionable local trend is for more frequent and more intense storm events, both during the winter and the summer. The town of Underhill generously funds and actively maintains a large inventory of roads, many of which have been subject to the unpredictable storms of recent years. As a local taxpayer, I would ask, what is the financial argument to be made that would have the town add this to its list of road liabilities by contributing to the maintenance of an old road that requires a very expensive upgrade to avoid repeated storm repairs? Question. As a Class 4 road, I understand the town has no obligation to fund any maintenance of this category of road. We could urge the town to avoid taking on more storm-exposed liability by adding Deane Road. We would urge the town to avoid taking on more storm exposed liability by adding Deane Road to its list of maintained roads. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. We make sure that we include that letter in the formal recording of the minutes and in the packet.
I will forward it to Donna
public
and
record.
forward it to the group.
Thank you. All right. Now that we've got that out of the way, now we can go back to Jennifer. Glad she has her glasses because this is hard to read sometimes.
I know, this is really small print. I should, for the geriatric in the group here, I should have it a little bit, I should print this in large print, like they do the books, large print. So what I would like to just review briefly, and I'm happy to go into detail with any member of the select board, any resident of Underhill, any employee. I always say every year and almost every quarter, if anyone has specific questions or they want to understand any part of the budget or our expenses, to please never hesitate to call me or set up an appointment to come visit me, because I am a weird person that loves to talk about money and finance. So it would make me happy. And if you bought me a beer or something, that might make me even happier. But anyway, so our books our auditors have started. I've started supplying things to the auditors, but we won't have our final audit till October, November. And we're a government, so there are what's called GASB principles, which is Government Accounting Standards. It's the Government Accounting Standards Board. And there are certain things, adjustments that they make every year. However, it's pretty clear to me where we're at now that I feel comfortable that I can share with you approximately where our year is ending. We also post into the prior year up until the end of August. So our fiscal year ends June 30th. We have 2 months where sometimes we get trickle in of expenses that we post to the prior year. I also have a few adjustments related to ARPA and the generators that we purchased that I need to make adjustments also into the general fund. But this stuff can be really boring, but this year I think it's actually pretty exciting because we don't have any bad news to report, which is always good news. So I'm going to kind of give you the highlights. I did do a presentation that we're not going to put up tonight. I am going to provide it to all of you, and it will be online. And it follows along with the pages on the budget status report, which was also be online for anyone that cares to go into further detail about it. Starting with, we have a general fund, we have the highway fund, we have a capital fund, and we have ARPA. ARPA will go away at the end of 2026, but that was the funds that were given to us by the Department of the Treasury. So starting with the general fund first, we'll look at it from a revenue standpoint and then the expense standpoint. From a revenue standpoint, with the general fund, we're up in an approximately $200,000 surplus for the year, which happened because we have about $100 and something thousand in surplus tax revenue. And that's not something that we can change or set. These aren't budgetable. That's not a budgetable item. When we do our budget, it's based on an estimated grand list. And then also we don't make final adjustments until the school tax comes in, which is way after that. So Amanda, right before we set our numbers, gives us what she believes is going to be the grand list number. So we also had about $30,000 over in our local agreement, something else that these things change depending on contracts that we have with residents. We also had an extra approximately $50,000 in interest income, which is solely because we're holding on to this chunk of ARPA funds to spend on the things that the select board agreed to spend them on, but we haven't spent them. So we're actually making money on the ARPA funds. Again, that will all have to be spent and be gone before 12/31/2026. So all of that is to say that we're at approximately $200,000 in the general fund income side above what we had budgeted for income. As far as expenses, I would say overall our expenses are in line and probably the closest to our budgeted expenses since I've been doing our books. from on the general fund. A couple of things that are noteworthy that went over. One is, or that you'll see that on pages 3 and 4 that kind of look different are, one is COBRA, which is something that we hadn't had before, but that's dependent on whether you have an employee who's taking COBRA or not, and that is reimbursed on the income side. So we don't, when an employee goes on COBRA, it doesn't cost us money, but you'll see it there. Also, our legal fees, which have often historically gone way over budget, did not this year. Even when we add in our planning and zoning, our legal still is in line. Our insurance costs are something that I would say that has been a battle for me personally to kind of estimate and keep up with. Next year, they're saying that we're going to have double-digit increases again. So it's hard to predict what our insurance is going to be. It also depends. Our insurance is based on that includes our workers' comp, our liability, our property insurance, our insurance for all of our vehicles, and pretty much everything is all in that one line item. And then the two items that did go over, but obviously didn't affect us as much, the select board contingency was in a deficit by about $31,000. And I did itemize what that was all about. I'm seeing there's not really, our election expenses went over by about $7,000, but that was page 5 to 7. And that's only because we had an extra election this year. So even though I'm going to point out a couple of things that were a little bit over or under by $1,000 or more, or 25%, at the end, we're still $200,000 approximately ahead of the game. Also, my category finance was over by about $14,500, and that was because it's totally dependent on the hours that I worked, and we had some major HR stuff that went on last year. So when we did my budgeting for the hours, mine ended up higher. Also, our audit came in, our final audit numbers came in higher. We've signed a contract for 5 years with a new audit firm, so we know ahead of time what our audit is going to cost us, unless something triggers a single audit. So again, going forward, that won't happen. I don't see anything else there. Hold on, keep going. A couple other things worth highlighting. The post office is slightly under because there was supposed to be some kind of a repair done, but either it hasn't been billed yet or it hasn't been done, and I don't know about that, but there was something with the floor or the basement or something. I don't know. It either hasn't been done or it hasn't been billed. And it has until the end of, if something's going to be billed, they have until the end of August. Planning and zoning, you're going to notice, is considerably under budget. And that's no secret. We don't have a planning zoning administrator, and we had budgeted a full-time planning and zoning administrator plus benefits. So you'll see the line item where we're paying Brad to do those extra responsibilities, but that's significantly less than what we'd be paying if we had a full-time employee. On page 14, you'll see there's some money for the generator deposit. That's going to be an offset by ARPA income. And also on page 14, the sidewalk study, you're going to see an expense coming out for $16,000 sidewalk study. But that one, we put that in the budget, but some of those expenses are this year and some will end up going into FY25. So bottom line for the total general fund expenditures, we budgeted 1.47 million. We came in at 1.49 million. Only $15,000 over budget without adjustments. So I think that's about as close as you could get to budget. That I don't even know how you can get that close, but we did. The highway, now switching to the highway fund, revenue and expenses, starting on page 15. The highway fund, most of our revenue from highway fund is coming from either taxes or loans, or grants, or reserves. We also get state aid for highways. So you'll see that's it. That's where the income comes from. And it's pretty well known. We don't put grants into our revenue if we don't have the money. So we may know that we're going to be applying for a Better Backroads grant, but we're not going to put it in unless we have the money. And then there's the other grants and aid. Also, we don't put in there unless we know we're going to get the money. So we don't put that on the budget. So you'll see some inconsistencies with what's budgeted and what's actual for grants. Also, sometimes with grants, we think we're going to get the money in one year, but it comes in the next year. So we have to make some adjustments. But the revenue for the highway is mostly predictable, whereas with the town hall, there's some other things that happen, other miscellaneous revenue. As far as highway expenses, we're well under budget for pretty much everything. And I think that we had a little extra in the salaries and benefits because of the way that we had projected we were going to configure the hiring, but then we ended up promoting Russ, which was an amazing choice, and then hired Ken. So we still have 4 people. We had budgeted we were going to have 5 because we had budgeted we were going to hire a full-time road highway commissioner, and we didn't. So that should come back in line this year. Several of the other expenses were over budget. We over budgeted. We didn't overspend, but we over budgeted them. And Russ and I talked briefly this morning, and we're going to sit down and hash that out so that we can better plan for our budget in FY26. But most everything was either on budget or under budget. One of the categories that we often go over budget, which I want to point out, is truck and heavy equipment, which was right on target this year. And again, I think that Russ did a great job managing the budget. Capital expenses, we purchased a new excavator. You're going to see that on pages 12 through 15. You'll see that we purchased a new excavator and all of the accoutrements that went with that. That's offset on the income side by the loan that we received. So, and again, I'm happy to sit down with anyone and explain how it flows, but on the highway income, you'll see the loan revenue, and then on the other side, you'll see the capital expense. You'll notice the capital expense is less than the loan revenue. That's because we spent less on the purchase of the equipment than we thought we were going to, so we took that extra money and we used it to pay down the note. So that 5-year note is now effectively on our long-term planning, a 4-year note, which affects our long-term capital plan, which is a whole nother thing. North Underhill station work came in under budget. And then lastly, you'll see under capital expenses for the highway, the generator purchase, and that will have an offset by the ARPA income that will come into that. So our capital was under by about $50,000 also. So what's the big picture? All of this is to say that I believe that at the end of this, after all the audits are done, there's going to be surplus in our highway fund and our general fund. So it will be up to the select board to make recommendations. And of course, the staff will also chime in looking at it when we look at the budget about what we think we should do with those surpluses. But what I want us to all start thinking about, and those become items to be warned on the at the election. When we met with staff and we were all talking about next year already, because we are always planning ahead and thinking, is we are facing some, I would say, challenging times as far as financially and tax-wise, because costs are continuing to increase and property values are continuing to increase. And so we are reaching a point where our CLA, which is our common level of appraisal for next year, for fiscal year 26, will be very low. It's going to force us to do a reappraisal. So when our common level of appraisal goes down, the rate that we pay as a percentage for the school tax is going to increase. So our taxes will increase. So having these surplus numbers, we'll be able to take that number, perhaps, if you choose, and we'll be able to apply some of that to help offset some of the extra taxes, that burden that we may have for fiscal year 26. And this problem with the property values increasing, forcing the reappraisal, is going to be probably a 2-year. If you remember, we did do one recently, but there's like a 2-year effect that happens when we do a reappraisal. So first you get to the point where you're like, okay, our CLA is really low, so our tax rate's going to be higher. And then the next year you do the reappraisal. So now all of our property values, and I'm a resident of this town, all of our property values have gone up. So now our tax rate may go up also. So it's going to take 2 years for that to kind of equalize. And then hopefully this crazy increasing of property values is going to slow, because the trend is really difficult for not only us, every town in Vermont is facing this. Our property values have doubled since 2019. So it's very difficult to sustain that from a tax perspective. So my hope is with increases in all the fund balances, we'll be able to effectively use any surplus that we have to hopefully help our residents take the bite out of some of those, what would be sizable increases in taxes, because that's our goal, is to stay within budget and make sure that we aren't creating any burden on all of us as taxpayers. So that's all I really have to say about that. But I think, I think that we all did a really great job. Select board, staff, all the vendors that we work with really made it through the year really well, and stayed right on target. So I think we did a great job tooting our horn.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone on the board have any questions for Jennifer?
I just have a quick comment, and then I just want to commend Jennifer on this. This is my first time as a select board reviewing this budget, and I just have to say how impressed I am in terms of the smart budgeting, really matching up with the expenses, the percentage of which, being at like 101% is unbelievable. And really, I just want to commend you guys for doing that so well. It's really impressive. And same for the highway department. That's really impressive to be that close to what you anticipated. So thank you guys for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dan.
Anyone else? Dan?
So at this point, we don't know how much of that 200,000. I know part of that is with the highway that we don't have to put in an article, but we don't know how much we have to put in articles for whatever we want to propose for it.
So approximately right now, the general fund looks to me like it has about $185,000 surplus. It looks to me like the highway fund has about $180,000. So yes, you can't use highway surplus funds to fund general government projects, but you could use general fund projects. You could use that. I mean, you can use the general fund surplus if you wanted to put it into, say, a highway reserve. But I think the highway is going to have its own surplus. And I think it may be, depending on where things are headed, wise to use the general fund surplus to help offset property taxes next year.
And we should have a general sense as far as the surplus by late November, early December.
Yeah, I'm hopefully sooner. I'm trying to get things to the auditors, and it's a new audit firm that specializes in government audits, and it's all they do. And my hope is that if I can keep on task with them and keep them motivated, that we'll actually get our numbers a little sooner so we can plan even better.
Patty said that this is just in time to spread goodwill and cheer, so I just want to say that's good.
Goodwill and cheer.
I just have a quick question. So the surplus for the highway, does that include, so we voted on the floor last year to put 100,000. Is that surplus number reflect the 100,000, or is that in a separate place?
So that surplus number doesn't reflect, this surplus number is for last year. So, but Brad brings up a really good point when we're thinking about that. And I explained this to Russ this morning when we were talking, that approximately $180,000 surplus for fiscal year 24. We've already budgeted fiscal year 25. That's the one we already started. We have 112,000, or whatever it ends up being, supplemental highway income that we voted in March. The taxpayers voted and approved to take that surplus for the next 5 years and put it into a highway reserve. So for fiscal year 26, when we're doing the budget in the next few months, we're going to be operating our budget with $100,000 less, because that 100,000 that we usually count on for income is going to be going into this reserve for the next 5 years. That's where this, and I know that's what you're getting at, that's where this highway fund surplus might come into play.
That wasn't my question. So not this town meeting, but last town meeting, we voted from the floor to put 100,000 into reserve.
Okay,
right?
so you're asking if that includes
If that
that?
is included in.
That I
think-
don't know.
I think it may be.
I don't
So
know.
I'm just saying, don't be illusion that we've got 180,000. that we
Right,
didn't
because I
spend.
haven't made all the reserve
100
posts
100
yet.
may be included in that.
It might be only 80, yeah.
So
That's
Pat,
helpful.
you might have to go to a discontent from Goodwill and Cheer.
It might, like I said, there's a lot of adjustments and entries that still need to be made, so that's a good point.
Yeah, and Brad, I'm glad you said that, because we're strategically trying to add to the highway reserve fund for in those instances where we have a major storm or some event, that some unexpected thing, and in the highway world, that unexpected does happen. But we need to build that reserve up for that responsible financing. So I'm glad you asked about that, because I was wondering similar story on that. But we're strategically trying to build up the reserves in the highway, especially the highway department.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Jennifer, as always, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is the Deane Road Class 4 maintenance request. There was a letter that was received. It was sent to Brad on the 22nd from the folks at Squabetti. Brad, do you want to
Yeah, I can just,
brief the board on?
Point of order. Point of order. I'm wondering, since that is slated for the agenda at 7, I don't know if people are planning to attend either in person or online, and if we should do something else and switch up the agenda, since we took out a big piece of the agenda and we're way ahead, but it may not be an issue.
That's an interesting point. I think we're going to rule in favor of keeping the ball rolling. That sometimes these things happen and there's adjustments to the agenda. So I think it's important that we, even if we moved it to 7 o'clock, someone can make the argument about anything else in the agenda. So I'm just going to rule that we are going to continue in the order of the agenda that's presented. And I think next time we present an agenda for the public, that, these are approximation times, not exact times, so that, if they need to present or want to participate, then they should, either be here or make sure they're on the agenda. But we should make that very clear that these are approximate times, not exact times.
yeah, it states that on our website. And I would just point out that Duncan McLean, who wrote the letter and called me, was here at 6. So he's been on the whole time. But
I can accept that rule of the chair.
So Brad, you want to go ahead?
yeah, I would just want to, so someone popped in on the telephone, I think, and they're not muted. So if it gets to be quite a bit of background noise, I'm going to have to mute you. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I did receive a phone call first from Duncan McLean on Deane Road, and he just said, oh, there's a bunch of erosion up there on the road, so you should get up there as soon as you can and take a look at it. So that day, I believe it was that day, Russ and I took a drive up there, and I took a couple of photographs that are in your packet. And Duncan's letter alludes to the municipal roads general permit and reductions in erosion that come from municipal roads. So I included the actual permit in your packet. And I'll just briefly explain what the municipal road general permit is. It's a permit that we're obligated to follow, and it regards sections of road that are hydrologically connected to a stream. So not all of our roads are hydrologically connected, obviously, but if there's a stream and there's a map and there's an inventory of these segments of roads, and they're graded based on an inventory that we do every 5 years, and then we do improvements to those, and we upgrade the segments on the database. Class 4 roads also have segments, and Deane Road does have multiple segments, mostly because of the brook that follows down the north side of the road pretty much the whole way. Class 4 roads are handled differently in the municipal road general permit, and on the cover of the permit here, I basically just wrote some pages to reference. So Class 4 roads are graded and evaluated differently from Class 3 dirt roads. And basically what it comes down to is a very simple thing. You have gully erosion, and then there's rill erosion. And gully erosion is anything that's a depth of a foot or more of scour or erosion in the roadway. So if that is the case, then the segment is not in compliance. But if it's less than that, the segment is, according to the regulations, is deemed to be in compliance. So it's very different from Class 3 roads where a crown comes into place, rill erosion comes into place, which is less than a foot of erosion. So these pictures that I took, in my opinion, are rill erosion. So they don't rise to the level of gully erosion. So that's what it comes down to with Class 4 roads. And then I just pointed out a couple other practices. They talk about turnouts and water bars, just to give you a little in the definition page of what those things are. But typically on a Class 4 road, that's what you see are turnouts, water bars, broad-based dips. So basically they're just depressions in the roadway itself that can handle water. Deane Road is a road that is kind of a dugway, so it's impossible to ditch the road because the sides of the bank are straight up and down, and there are very few places to turn the water out. I also included in your packet our highway ordinance. And this is our road, driveway, and trail ordinance. And I didn't include the entire ordinance. I just included the section that talks about Class 4 roads. And Patty, Bob, and Dan can attest to reviewing this section of the ordinance when we do get requests to do work on Class 4 roads. So any questions about the municipal road general permit or Class 4 highways?
I have a question for you, Brian. If you talked about the depth of a foot, if there are times when Deane Road is gouged out a foot or more, and Pete Sajas, I'm not pronouncing his last name correctly.
Saja, yes.
Sajas, he maintains the road to fill it in when it is dug out, but are you saying that if it gets to the point of 1 foot, that the town would have to go in and fill that?
Yes, we are, depending on the segment, right? If it's in a segment, first of all, you got to determine if it's hydrologically connected, not the entire road the entire road's not a continuous segment, but there are many segments on the road. So
It's a much more complicated.
But we currently have class 3 roads that are out of compliance too. So we have many roads that are out of compliance, and we work with the grants and aid program and the Better Back Roads program, such as Lower English, to get those roads into compliance.
So Brad, going back to the packet,
I need to have like a bell or something when, if I don't turn the mic on, you can ring the bell and gets my attention. So thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the report. So there is the question that I'm seeing in the email is that whether or not they're requesting that the board authorize the road crew to clean out the water bars on the lower 1/8 half of Deane Road. That's the ask, right? So I'm wondering if the board should deliberate this request in public or in private. Do you have a sense as far as if that deliberation to answer that question should be done in public forum or in private?
I think it should be done in a public setting myself. But I think, not skipping ahead, but to future agenda items. So we have a class 4 road policy, so we had just to catch the new select board members up to speed. So class 4 roads are roads that are not class 2 or 3. So class 2 highway is Pleasant Valley, River Road, Pleasant Valley, right? It's a federal highway. It's considered class 2. Class 3 we basically have 52 miles of dirt road. Some of it's paved. So all the roads that we maintain are either class 2 or 3. Then we have other roads that were laid out by the town that we have a right of way on, and those roads are considered class 4. So, and then there's guidance. So the rule of thumb is that we do not have to maintain class 4 roads, only with the caveat of the municipal roads general permit and other situations that are not about what we're talking about here. So the class 4 road study committee, their task was to look at basically the 12 class 4 roads that we have, analyze them. We did site visits, and they came up with basically a rationale and a matrix of how to evaluate class 4 roads, because they're not all the same. You know, like the road Stevensville to the state park, for example, is a class 4 highway utilized by many residents and the state of Vermont to access the trailhead. That's different from Deane Road or from Corbett Road. So anyway, that report I was hoping to present to the board, and then Bob, Dan, and Patty had received a presentation and a report from that committee, dismissed the committee, but then the consensus was that the select board should hold a public hearing regarding that report. So the select board themselves could get input from the people. So that I'm hoping to put on a future select board agenda item, but I'm thinking that, you know, that might provide some guidance for you when looking at this request. But nonetheless, you have this request in front of you. You have my advice would be to utilize the information I gave you regarding the MRGP program, and to use as your guide the Underhill Road driveway and trail ordinance.
Thank you, Brad. Dan?
I'm really looking forward to us getting this policy in place so that we can be really clear and consistent. And I know that we've had requests, over the years from various roads, and I'm not sure, I know it's been a consideration. It hasn't been the bottom line in the decision. But one of the considerations is there a business that is compromising the road? For example, there are a few businesses that challenge the road, like sugaring, heavy trucks. Now, there are a couple class 4 roads where people who have been, owning these businesses have stepped up themselves and done heroic work to keep their road maintained. And because they recognize, I need this road for what I'm doing, I'm making an income, and they recognize that they might have something in the game in order to be able to step up. Now, like I say, I don't remember if we've made that determination and deciding what to do on an emergency basis, if this can be called that. But that is one of the criteria I think that we've looked at. And is it fair for all the taxpayers to be paying in order for a business to thrive? And I'm not saying up or down on that. I'm just asking the question. And I know that the people that are operating on these roads, they are taxpayers as well. But, it's just a question I think that we have raised, and it's something that we would want to think about.
Thank you, Dan. Any other discussion on the Deane Road maintenance request?
It certainly pushes us forward. The Class 4 Road Study Committee's report we received in, I think when that was 2023, beginning of this year.
Yeah, I think it was end of last year.
And we haven't taken action on that. And I think this request certainly fits in with that report. Whatever we do on all the Class 4 roads needs to be consistent. We need to have a logical argument basis for making decisions on all of them. And I am reluctant to take one of them out of context of the report and take action on that, because then that opens up Pandora's box for everything. If we take action on Deane Road, then what about the other Class 4 roads where we have the committee's report? I think we need to come back to this committee report and go through the process of pulling it apart and making decisions based on what the committee report includes. And certainly the two new select board members haven't had a chance to see that.
And I could have just stuck that in the packet, but I was really hesitant to, because I think it should be prefaced with a history of what Class 4 roads are, some, our road policy, how the committee went about it, and then possibly after you reviewed that, then as Bob wanted, or as the board wanted at the time, is have a separate public hearing so people could be heard, and then you could make your decision about either accepting the policy or making changes.
Right. So I think we're at the point, there's a request from a resident for the board to take action. So I may be wrong, but I think that, and that's okay if I'm wrong, either we are going to move forward with that request and grant it, Or we're going to say, no, sorry, we're not going to do that. Or the third choice, I guess, would be is that we need to think about this some more and we may need to review, hold on to this information, this request, and then look at our class 4 policy and then come back to revisit it. I don't know if there's any real other choices that we have, but I see those as our 3 choices that the board can make, is that we can either grant it, we can say, no, thank you, or let's pause, review the class 4, bring the rest of the board up to par, and then, once we've had public comment period and review that, then, make a decision one way or the other. But I'm happy to entertain any ideas that other members of the board may have.
I also think we might need additional information about the specific segment of Deane Road that's in question, whether that specific segment, as you said, they're divided and not all of them are hydrologically connected to the waterway, and whether the specific section that's under question is, and how that is determined, whether that is part of it. I think that would be important information to have before making a decision.
I'd be more than happy to inventory Deane Road and take a look at it and determine where the segments are. And I could go through the same evaluation process that we used when we reevaluated the roads. And basically, but it comes down to that one simple question: is there gully erosion or is there not?
Right.
So, but I'd be more than happy to do that. I'd be more than happy to tell you how many segments there are.
And I think in general, my inclination is that we do need to kind of wait a little bit, especially to get Dan and I up to speed on kind of where things had been in the past, and make sure that we understand kind of all of the work that has been going on the class 4 roads. And I think that it probably makes sense to pause on making a decision at this time, and ask them to wait until we are ready to do the public forum and have a more consistent and uniform policy for those roads.
Thank you, Maureen. I fully agree that you took the words right out of my mind.
That's exciting. Even in a virtual environment. So is it the consensus of the board that we will respond to saying that your request is under review? And
Agreed.
we hope to have a response as quickly as possible, but we have more data that we need to review before we render a decision on the request.
Mhm.
Is that the consensus of everyone? Yeah, okay. So I think that's going to be the consensus of the board, Brad, if you want to communicate that it's going to be under review, and we hope to have a response sometime soon, but there's more data that needs to be collected, and that the other new members of the board need to be brought up to par before we render a decision.
Okay. That kind of leads us into the next thing, but go ahead, Bob.
To discuss the select board packet deadline and future agenda items.
Yes. So my goal would be to present that class 4 road policy with some background information. Perhaps we want to look maybe if there is time, not just at Deane Road, but some other class 4 roads, and see where the status of, just an easy drive on the class 4 roads, as I say, because the criteria or the evaluation process is very simple. You're not looking at the crown of the road, you're not looking at culverts, you're not looking at anything. You're just looking, it would be nice, I think, for the board to know, are there any class 4 roads where we have gully erosion?
Mhm.
So we can come back with that, and I'd like to do a nice introduction to the policy, and then perhaps the following meeting, we could do the public hearing.
Brad, perhaps we want to consider, or the board may want to consider having a special meeting separate to just discuss this single item, so that we're focused on this and this alone, and not have other things. When we can discuss that, in a little bit, but that may be something that the board wants to consider, is that, we want to take this up on its own separate item and have a special meeting to just do exactly that.
Yeah, makes sense.
That sounds like a good idea.
So the packet is another thing I wanted to discuss. So a lot of the times I'll get last minute requests. It might be Tuesday morning. I'm trying to get the packet out Tuesday afternoon. I just don't think that's working too well. The clincher is here is the AP warrant, I guess. So I like to have the AP warrant, or at least the summary pages of the warrant in the packet. But if we didn't have to wait for that, because I know, standard done on Monday typically, right? So Monday, sometimes it'll be finished by the end of the day, Monday or Tuesday morning. But I'd like to set a hard deadline for select board agenda items for Thursday at noon time. That would give me the afternoon on Thursday and the day on Friday to formulate an agenda, and then be able to get that, just run a preliminary agenda by Bob. The chair usually reviews the agenda. After review, it becomes final. So I just think that we need a little bit more time, because then we can have a thoughtful, like the thing I did with the speed sign there. I just wanted to, I do think it's very important to have memos on each agenda item. Doesn't have to be long, but it just something clear, concise, so you know what you're looking at, right? And you can make an informed decision, instead of just rather putting items on and then nothing sometimes in the packet and then just discussing them. So that's my recommendation. And I don't know if that's too, that it'll slow the process down, obviously, because something comes in on Friday. We have a select board meeting next Thursday. Somebody's going to say, well, why can't I get on the agenda? Is there any thoughts about that? Or we could even set the deadline at noontime Friday. I don't know.
I'm not going to speak for the board, but I'm going to speak as a member of the board, saying that I think be mindful that, you are wearing multiple hats, and we're asking an awful lot of you. And if you think that you need the deadline to be noontime on Thursday, that the board should be mindful of that. And that I think it lends to a more productive meeting when the board gets together, with having a detailed report for us to review prior to the meeting, so that the meetings go as smooth as possible. So I welcome, whatever time you set as the town administrator, like this is the deadline that I need in order to make that happen. I'm good with that. And if we need to publish that's saying, going forward, this is what needs to happen so that everyone's aware, then that's fine. But the rationale is that we want to make sure that the time that we do spend is more productive, and not asking questions that could have been answered by a memo in the file based upon, information that may be coming forward. That's my 2 cents. I'll open it up to other members of the board if they want to weigh in on that.
I would also agree with that, and I think there's nothing to prevent us from adjusting course if we get feedback that Thursday, for some reason, is not working. We can certainly make that adjustment, but I'm all for an efficient meeting and giving people time, that chances to put this together. So I would agree with what Bob said.
I knew you were my favorite. No, I'm just
So
I'd add one more comment.
Yep.
I think having that deadline as a standing deadline makes a lot of sense. I would just encourage you to allow for emergency things that pop up that can come in after the deadline. So
Yeah,
something that's.
Well, I just wanted to say that before, I'll let you finish, but like Russ is a different story. Like Russ is going to come in with something. I'm talking internal things are a little different. I'm talking about things from the outside.
But even internal stuff, it should, to the extent that it's better you wait to the next meeting if you don't have all your material in the packet, because it was very difficult for all of us doing the calculations for the crosswalk stuff. That was not helpful. So I would prefer to delay taking action on something and having material in the packet and having a process with a short memo saying, here's the recommendation, here are the costs. It just makes the whole discussion a whole lot smoother. And just keep in mind that you can always have an emergency that comes up. and then you can roll that in as an emergency item, but those should be fewer and far in between, and just have your standing deadline.
Any other comment? Dan?
What are the public constraints? When are you supposed to legislatively publish the agenda
So the
in the
agenda,
packet?
so the agenda has to go out 48 hours ahead of time for regular meeting. So it has to be published, and I always make that. I like to make sure that the agenda is on Front Porch Forum 48 hours, 2 days before. My goal would be to get it out on Monday would be nice. But also I want to be mindful of Jennifer and the staff here that it takes, some time to get the packet together. So I'm not trying to, I guess I just like to get ahead of it a little bit and be mindful about not trying to cram too many things into agenda. And, but yeah, to answer your question, 48 hours. But we do have in your rules of procedure, the packet should be distributed 72 hours prior to the meeting. And I rarely do that just because there's not time to get it out. But
I think that when we get around to it, changing that to 48 hours, I think 48 hours is sufficient for the public. And speaking for myself, I've been through innumerable select board meetings. So I've looked at these packets and they kind of look the same after a while. It doesn't take me as long to go through them as it did in the beginning. I'm respecting newer people who, are trying to decipher some of this stuff. But I think 48 hours might be enough. And I would defer to the newer people to see if that is in their eyesight as well.
Speaking for myself, I feel like thus far we've been on a pretty consistent 2 days. You get it usually on Tuesday, and I think that's been plenty of time to review and read through the materials to be ready for Thursday evening. So I think that I would be comfortable with the 48 hour instead of 72.
Yeah,
how
48
would you
hours.
feel? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
48 hours has been sufficient for me so far as well.
How would you feel if, say there was like a document that came in early from outside some other, that was going to be on the future. Would you mind if I sent that to you earlier or just keep everything included in the packet?
I think it has to be in the packet. And I think that if the wild card gets thrown, then it will be determined either by yourself or whether or not you think it has relevance or you can run it by the chair.
No. I was referring to if I got something early, say tomorrow, for example, I've got something that might be on the agenda for next Thursday or 2 Thursdays from now.
It's best to keep it in the packet.
Keep it in the
I
packet.
think
It's
it's
all together.
Agreed.
You don't want to
Because
get,
otherwise,
I don't want, piecemeal would
too
not be a good
scattered.
idea. So it's the consensus to go ahead with this idea that if you need to have everything by Thursday at noontime, am I understanding the board correctly or?
Yep.
Okay. Is that all you got, Brad? Normally there's more.
no, that's it.
Thank you, Brad.
Sure.
Well, that brings us to closing public comment at 7:05. Is there any members of the public that would like to talk to the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Duncan McLean here. I did not anticipate my request for more work to be done by Brad. I know his agenda and workload is already big enough. So I guess, I know this is public comment, but I'm not sure. I guess I would suppose to request if we can do private repair on Deane Road, because the conditions of the water bars are such to the point where I'm very concerned at a small rainfall causing more damage. But again, this is public comment, not request. I'm not sure what would work and what wouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Appreciate it. Any other comment from the public? Hearing and seeing none. Next item on the agenda is to review and approve the AP warrants. So, do that. In the order that's in the packet, as soon as I can get to it. So page 99, Brad. So move that we approve the warrants dated 7/23/2024. I will move that. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that? Hearing none, are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the warrants dated 7/23/2024, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I don't think there's anything else, Brad. No minutes or warrants,
Just the one warrant, no minutes,
just that one. Okay.
just the one warrant.
Next item on the agenda then is member items, correspondence, announcements. Schedule. The next regular scheduled select board meeting is August 8th. We did talk about maybe holding a special meeting to discuss class 4. We can send out an email to find out what other people's availability could be, or we could take time now to see. I'm not sure how much time and what your availability is, Brad.
Yeah.
But if you want to look at that and then get back, and we can send out a doodle poll or some type of email poll to the board and find out what everybody's availability is and try to make it work offline, or if you want to do it now, makes some difference to me.
Probably an off Thursday would work best, right? So maybe on the 8th, if we present the class 4 road policy and kind of get introduced to that, you could theoretically try for, the 15th or the 29th.
The 15th, I'll be away on vacation, but the 29th could probably work for me.
Yeah, I could probably do either.
29th works for me.
Yeah, it'd be, I think, very important to have all 5 here.
So the 29th is looking like the day?
Yeah, kind of tentatively set that up, and I'll send an email out just so everybody can check their calendars.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody have anything they want to announce? Any correspondence or anything?
I just have one thing, but I'll wait.
Just wanted to double check. For some reason, I have on my calendar that we're supposed to have a select board meeting on Wednesday, August 7th. Is that still, is that,
It's the 8th.
okay, but there's nothing on the 7th, right?
Not that
I don't know why I have that on my calendar. Okay, thank you.
So Joe McLean, our attorney, was just appointed by the governor, or was appointed by the governor to the judiciary. He'll be our new Superior Court judge in the environmental division. So Joe's getting sworn in on Monday by the governor. And, he called me personally before the news came out. You might have seen it in Vermont Digger. But I'd just like to congratulate him. I'm really excited for him. And I'll miss talking with him because we conferred a lot and we got to know each other pretty well over the last 3 years. So I just wanted to point that out. But we have several other attorneys that I've also worked with at Stitzel, Page, and Fletcher, which is now called SP&F, and look forward to working with them.
Brad, would you be interested in representing the town of Underhill and going to that swearing-in ceremony?
Yes, Joe invited me actually to go, so I'd like to take him up on it.
I guess I would be in favor of Brad representing the board in the town of Underhill for that, and wishing Joe continued success in his career. If that's.
Yeah, I support that totally.
I applaud Joe McLean for all the work, and I want to put that in the public record all the work that he's done on behalf of the town of Underhill. He's had a good relationship with us, and we have counted on him. And I am sure that in his new position, he will be invaluable.
Absolutely agree.
Mhm.
If you could bring some Jericho maple syrup for him, that'd be nice. I don't know if you can find any.
I will bring him some syrup. That's a good
Underhill
idea.
stuff might be hard to come by, but
Good idea.
I know you'll do your best. Anything else? Anybody else have anything? Okay, going to go into executive session to discuss a personnel policy. So that section of the statute is it one VSA?
Yeah, I can just give it to you here. Just give me a sec.
I would ask that Jennifer join us with her work on the edits.
Okay, well, when we get to the section of the statute, we can add that into the motion.
So it's Title 1.
Yep.
Section 313. A3.
So
No,
I'm
I'm sorry. Hold on, Bob. I'm sorry. A1, 3.
A13.
Yeah.
So I move that the Underhill Select Board enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter per 1 VSA Section 313A13 to include the Select Board and Jennifer, our human resource extraordinaire. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor of moving into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion to move into executive session is 5-0. We are now in executive session. The time is 7:14. Motion to come out of executive session by Bob Stone, seconded by,
Maureen Collins-Cole, seconded.
all those in favor of coming out of executive session, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. It is now 7:50 PM on the 25th of July. The action taken by the Underhill Select Board is that we are going to continue to work on the personnel policy and revisions, and Patty and Dan will meet with staff hopefully on Monday, pending any, insignificant or unknown, I guess, obstacles that may come up, but the plan is for Dan and Patty to meet with the staff Monday at a time to be determined. Dan Kelsey, right. That's it. Any, I guess a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
I second.
Motion to adjourn made by Patty, seconded by Maureen. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. It is now 7:51. It is the 25th of July. We will stop the recording now.